Welcome to many familiar faces, and welcome to the new faces whom I haven't met yet. I hope to get to know you all, and I hope you all reciprocate and get to know me. I want to just share with you the single most important reason why I support and promote school choice and fight for a parent's right to choose. And that's because we cannot expect the over 825,000 students from low-income families who arguably have no school choices to wait for our public schools to reform themselves. In Illinois, that accounts for about 20% of the kids in our public school system. And in Chicago, the number is even more staggering. We have about 90% of our kids in Chicago enrolled in Chicago public schools, and that's about 405,000 students. So what we're really asking you to do here is to support a parent's right to choose the best quality education for his or her child. Now look at the many freedoms that we have here and the unalienable rights we have here in this country. Why can't every parent be empowered to choose a quality education for his or her child? School choice is a proven way to solve the education crisis in our underperforming schools. Here's a remarkable opportunity to turn the lives around of the children across the state of Illinois. Let's fund the child. When the money follows the child, the competition alone compels our public schools to improve. What I really hope that you get from this luncheon, or you take away from this luncheon, is that this is not a partisan issue. We have considerable support from both sides of the aisle from all of our leaders, both political, civic, and business leaders. If you're unsure of the merits of school choice and the results from school choice programs, let's learn about how parents in Florida, Arizona, Pennsylvania, when they're given an array of educational options, the graduation rates in these states increase. The dropout rates in these states decrease. Enrollment levels in these states increase. And public school funding, to many of you may be surprised, that also increases. And lastly, what you've come to hear about is how Ohio has seen many successes from their school choice programs. What you'll hear today is from a pioneer how he spent a considerable amount of time in his work professionally and also throughout the state politically, worked to attain educational choices and increase educational options throughout the state of Ohio. So I hope that you enjoy this lunch. Please get to know myself and also our speaker. And thank you again for joining me today.
Okay, welcome again to another in the series of the Heartland Institute's Educational Choice Forums. We're going to speak with an author and a member of the White Hat Management Incorporated School Divisions, and that interview will follow very shortly. Because I understand what you're saying is every child a right to learn, every child a right and parent to choose their educational direction. However, there have been many referendums brought up about choice in California and Michigan. Usually they fail. How do you respond to that in terms of the will of the people for choice and vouchers?
Well, unfortunately, my answer won't be as simple as your question. There have actually been 5 such ballot issues, and this has to do with ballot initiative law. When you go to put something on the ballot through citizen initiative, you are seeking a yes vote on your question. I don't care what the issue is. All around the country, political science has observed, without exception, that when you start out on such an issue, you have to have 65% or more favorable polling on your issue. You must spend $3 for every dollar of the opposition, and then you might get 51% at the ballot box, because the opponents will be absolutely unlicensed in their criticisms. They'll distort truth, they'll lie, because they get away with it and scare people. And so the citizenry in this country understands that legislatures are supposed to take care of things. And in most places except California, they are reluctant to pass an initiative which will change that direction. That's the problem. The way to get education choice is to have legislature pass it. Then let the opponents go to the ballot, and they won't carry the day either.
Mr. Brennan, Mr. David Brennan, is a remarkable man. He's been involved in the school choice movement for over 20 years. He has not only been passionate about education, but he's also contributed considerable amount of his time, resources to a parent's right to choose. He has started and continues to support 60 charter schools throughout the country. He is a well-knowledgeable man, not only about education. He was formerly an accountant. He was also an attorney. And he is the president and CEO of White Hat Management. Please join me in welcoming a dear friend to the school choice movement and a partner of ours, Mr. David Brennan.
I've been around the country enough and been in enough different states and put education facilities in. We're in 7 states now. And I've talked to so many people in education. It's extraordinary to me how each community says, oh, but we're different. We're unique. We have our own unique problems. Now, to a great extent, that certainly has to be true. Each community has its own culture that they develop. But in the education world, that is not true. The problems are almost the same everywhere you go. They look the same, they act the same, and the kids react the same. The thing that's most disturbing to me is I just recently turned 75 years of age. And I was quite sure, long before I achieved this age, that choice would be the dominant system of education delivery in this country. We're a long way from that. So in that sense, I'm sort of discouraged about how difficult it has been to come as far as we have, or not as far as I think we should have. But it reminds me of that story about when we're young, we see all these mountains around us, and we choose to climb one of them. That becomes our life career. And we keep our eye on the peak. We've got to make the top of that mountain. At a certain point in your life, you get a certain distance up the mountain, and the peak is still a long way off. And you realize for the first time in your lifetime you're not going to make that peak. It's sort of discouraging and depressing until you look down and see how far you've come. We've come an awful long way in about 10 years. And I'm very proud to have been part of that movement. It's only been 4 years since the United States Supreme Court confirmed the legal right of a state to allocate state dollars to support the education choice of parents. It's only been 4 years. At your place setting is a book called Victory for Kids, which is the story that involves me and part of our struggle to get where we were in Ohio, which is the background of that case. And the book was published at a time just after the decision of June in 2002, and there's an ending chapter that deals with that. Much of what I say today will be touched upon also in that book, so you don't have to take notes. I repeat a lot of it in the book. But the reason that's so is the truth hasn't changed. The issue hasn't changed. The solution hasn't changed. The opposition arguments are very effective. I was saying here at lunch that the most incredible PR argument that's been put out there that the public buys is, like all good PR, has truth in it, but not necessarily true. And that is, choice programs take money from public schools. We've all heard that one, right? Very effective. I mean, the public doesn't think beyond that. And there's truth in that. Most of the money is routed through public school systems to support choice. But that doesn't make the statement true, because the children aren't there anymore. Why in God's name should any of the money stay with the public school system? And in every single case, a substantial portion of the money stays there when the kid is gone. It's like when a tenant moves from your apartment to somebody else's apartment, some of the money they were paying you goes to the new apartment, but you keep some of it. It's the most bizarre, but that's the truth. But we never get the chance to respond to that because by the time you go through the lengthy explanation of how all that works, the listener is thinking of something else. The sound bite, you take money from public schools, has been very effective, and I bow to the superior PR of our opposition. But the fact that the opposition has been effective in that phrase, and the fact that we are facing the strongest unified voice lobby our country has ever seen. There is no other organization speaking with a single voice in opposition to school choice that comes even close to the power of the two teachers' unions combined, the economic power and the political power. And they fund the opposition. You probably don't know what I'm going to say to you next, and I'm perfectly willing to support it with whatever information you need to have to support this argument. We are the only Western democracy where money does not follow the child. The only one. Our education system is perfectly aligned with Cuba and North Korea. Perfectly aligned. And here in this great country of ours where we treasure individual rights, we value the power of consumer choice. Somehow we wear blinders when it comes to our children's education, while in front of us we're destroying them. Do you know how many children a year go through the age of get to the age of 18 and are not going to get a high school diploma? It's over 1 million a year. Every year. 1 million children. And we have damned them, condemned them in this society of ours to a life of frustration and crime, and we're destroying them. And I got to tell you, we keep doing that, it's going to build up. It'll be impossible to live here. Everyone agrees we have a problem with education. My table mates were talking about that starting out earlier. No one has to be convinced. Education has to have some substantial reform. Everyone agrees with that. We disagree on how. When we disagree on how, it too often deteriorates in, well, if I ran the school systems, here's what I would do. Well, quite frankly, that begs the question. Who's in charge has little to do with what's going to happen. It's a huge bureaucracy wherever it exists. And I think that I've come to learn in my lifetime that a synonym with a bureaucrat is the word no. No. Well, what about no? Well, no. Would you disagree with that? And the educrats are at the top of the peak, of the top of the hill on this. The biggest reason why we need choice, the biggest reason, is to create markets for innovative ideas. That's why choice works in a competitive economic situation in any society. And the lack of choice destroys innovation. Who are you going to sell your idea to? You'll read in the book that when I started out in this whole enterprise, we discovered some interesting things in our businesses about how to help people who don't take well to traditional learning methods, how to turn them around and help them with that. And I was eager to go back to my Akron public school system to share this information with them. I don't want to be crude, but it was as if I had passed gas in church. It was totally unacceptable. Totally unacceptable. I mean, it was the most stunning experience, and my wife loves to tell this story, that about once every month or two, we'd have a meeting. It was always in the evening. I don't know why, 7:30 in the evening. And I was there 3 years going to this group, Akron Public Schools, and the agenda looked familiar. And I had my big, bulky file with me, and the very first meeting was the identical agenda with a different date. That's what we got done in 3 years. It's the last meeting I went to. School choice has nothing to do with better or worse education per se. It provides the opportunity for innovative people to exercise their innovative ideas and test them on the consumers and see if they work. Because out of that, we get success. That's the American story. That's what makes us a great country. It's because we treasure individual initiative into giving us new ideas. Good Lord, look at the computer industry, which has been virtually free of regulatory restraint for 20 years. It's moving so fast, none of us can keep up. We use computers all through our schools. We have 60 schools, 20,000 students. We have a computer for every single student. And they're obsolete almost the day they get delivered. The bells and whistles that are changing, it's incredible. Incredible. Software, by the way, is not keeping up, which I find rather fascinating in the education world, by a long shot. A lot of it's going on, but we're way behind in that. I don't want to get off track here. The value of choice comes from the safety it comes. I can work hard to develop a new way of doing something, and someone out there is going to buy it from me. With a public education monopoly, that will never happen, unless you have some political pull. This isn't an education argument. This is a political argument. This is an economic argument. Now, having preambled all this with that kind of statement, I'm reminded of a comment that's mentioned in the book again by Schopenhauer, the German philosopher. And I'll paraphrase it. All great ideas go through 3 stages. Ridicule. I've lived on that one. I could tell you horror stories about how I was treated by groups I talked to about this idea 15 years ago, 18 years ago. Intense opposition, and self-evident. In all the Western democracies, choice is self-evident. We're in the middle of the intense opposition. If we cave in, it'll be another generation or 2 before it comes up again. We, choice advocates, like Felicia's organization, and those of you here who understand how important this issue is. Why do we fight so hard? Because I think in one way or another, we all agree the future of our very nation is dependent upon solving this problem. We have welcomed in this country for 400 years persons from every place else on earth. And they've come here to be part of this great experiment and make their own good fortune happen in this society. We believed deeply in individual rights. But we said to parents, you can't decide where your child goes to school. Isn't that crazy? It's a free country, like heck it is. Not if you're poor. Not at all. And the proof is all the rest of the people sitting in this room. Every one of you exercised choice, your families did. Why? They moved to a place where there was a good school, where they paid private tuition for you. Terrific. I'm not denigrating that. I applaud that. Thank God that happened while the rest of the system was falling down around our ears. Thank God that happened. But the proof of choice is what your families did. They had the economic power to support their choice. Now, one of the disturbing things on this issue is in 1925, the United States Supreme Court ruled in a case called Pierce versus Society of Sisters, an Oregon case. The state of Oregon in the early 20s, in its wisdom, had ruled that to satisfy the compulsory education requirement of the state of Oregon, you had to go to a government school, a public school. You could not go to a private school and satisfy that requirement. Well, naturally, that got into the courts, got the United States Supreme Court, where the court said, in very forceful words, children are not the wards of the state. Parents have the primary obligation, duty, and right to select where their child will be educated. Those are powerful words. And they've been forgotten. I don't know why. The court has never, ever referred. In the case we won in 2002, they didn't even footnote that case. And that was a unanimous decision in 1925 in this country. It saved the private school system. Because if that case had gone the other way, every private school would have closed. And how often have you all heard the argument, maybe not so much recently, but I used to hear it all the time, well, if all the kids were in the public schools, they'd be fine because we'd have all the good students, we'd all look better. Ever heard that argument? Of course you have. That goes back to the state of Oregon 80 years ago. And soundly refuted by our Supreme Court. All that the Zellman case, which this book is written about, all it said was, oh, by the way, if the state wants to provide some of the funds that are now being collected to educate our children and fund that choice, that's okay. That's all it says. Because the Pierce case already established the sound principle that parent choice wins. It's parents versus the government. It's parents versus educrats. It's parents versus politicians. That's what this fight is about. And the parents are not organized because so many are happy with their choices. Now, they've got choices, so they don't understand. We have to fight for those who don't. And if we don't fight for those who don't, they won't get that choice. If they don't get that choice, it won't be very damn long, and you won't have it either. We fight our fights wherever they're presented to us. We don't choose the issues. We don't choose the ring we fight in, but we got to fight. And when we do, we'll win. Because we're winning. Now, Felicia wanted me to talk about Ohio politics, and it's sort of a... Felicia's made the point to me that you're getting bipartisan support here, Illinois, for the Illinois Choice Initiative. Is that correct? It's not good for me to put as much stress on politics as I was planning on doing today, because in Ohio we're in a different world. Republicans favor choice and Democrats don't. I wish that weren't so. We have one Democrat who voted for a charter school bill 2 years ago in our legislature. And when the Cleveland voucher program was first adopted, 6 Democrats voted for that bill, and they were absolutely devastated by their party in the ensuing election, never got reelected anything again, got drummed out of the party. So in Ohio, it's a very clear partisan issue. I do know, because I am active nationally in this choice movement, there are other states where bipartisanship is beginning to show up, and I'm glad. It is not right that this is a political argument. We should be talking about kids. Do we tax ourselves to support just public schools? Some people believe that's true, and to those persons, I bow my head and I say, if you believe that, nothing I can say will ever change your mind. Or do we tax ourselves to educate children? And I suggest if you buy into that argument, then the other arguments don't mean anything. Because if you believe we tax ourselves to educate children, then who should decide how and where that's done? Does anybody here honestly think the government should have that power over a parent? I've had a response to say, well, in some cases, yes. The arrogance of that, that I know more than you do about your kid. I've debated this thing over the years. There's a lawyer up in Cleveland, the head of Squire Sanders & Dempsey, big firm. And John and I would debate around the state 4 or 5 times. It takes me a while sometimes to figure out the right repostate or something. And so the last time he and I debated, I said, now I've heard this from you before, John, that with some kids, we probably ought to have someone else make that decision because the parents aren't capable of making a good decision about those kids. And I said, well, does that include me, John? Oh, no, you probably make good decisions. I said, well, you're making a judgment about that. Maybe you're wrong. I said, by the way, John, I have 4 children. What are their names? Think of this. The arrogance for me to tell you what's best for your child. I mean, it upsets me to say it. There are many parents in the inner city who are struggling just to survive. But I want to tell you something. We educate their kids. And I've been doing this for 11 years now in Cleveland. And I'll tell you something. I believe to the ends of my toes. They love their kids just as much as you and I do. And don't you ever doubt it. Just as much. And they know they need help raising those kids, educating those kids, and they want some help to do so. The only place they can look is the school. They know their own lives are a mess, often. 2 jobs, 3 jobs, many of them. What's the proof of this? The great thing about John Walton, a dear friend, whom we lost at the wrong time. And without John Walton, there wouldn't be a choice movement in this country. I got distracted. He was there in the beginning when we started our first 2 voucher schools in Cleveland. They're referred to in the book. And John had a heart bigger than this building and understood this issue. When he came to Cleveland to help us with our first schools, he didn't ask me how much we needed. He said, whatever you need, you tell me. Now, he did say, I'll match what you put up, which is a smart thing to do. Man doesn't have it. I don't care how much money he has. He'll have a whole lot less unless he does things like that. And that's how we did it. When nobody believed in what we were talking about. Nobody believed what we were doing. Well, I'll come back to my train of thought. I'm sorry I lost it when I mentioned John. He just died a year ago, June. And John and Ted Forsman funded a fund to take care of what turned out to be 40,000 kids nationally with private scholarships, privately funded. Money raised by them to contribute to various communities to help provide some of the funding to inner city schools, which are mostly religious schools. They're the ones that can afford to stay alive. And they put over $100 million into this program. It's still operating all around the country. About 60,000 kids on private scholarships in this country today. There may be a program here in Chicago. I should know. I don't know. Is there one, Felicia? Privately funded scholarship program. And what they found out was this. The average tuition in Cleveland is still $2,500 a year in the inner city Catholic schools and Lutheran schools. They found out that original programs were to give 50% scholarships. Back when they were about $1,500 to $2,000 average total tuition. So families had to come up with $750 or $1,000 per kid. They stand in line to do it. Families are so poor you can't believe they could find the money. And they do it. And they have 3, 4, and 5 kids, and they do it. And these are parents that can't make good decisions about their kids. It breaks my heart to tell you that. And let me explain something to you about consumer choice and power that I've come to learn in running these schools. We take it for granted because we have it. We have economic power ourselves. No one's going to get tough with us, that kind of stuff. It works for us, right? We like this system. We like this society. We opened voucher schools. This is explained in the book. In 1996, in the Cleveland Voucher Program, 2 schools, the first 2 schools in the country ever opened just for voucher students. 3 years later, or a year later, Ohio adopted a charter school law. The funding in Cleveland was limited to $2,250 a kid. Charter school funding was $5,000 per kid. We were putting very heavy subsidy into running these voucher schools. And frankly, I wasn't sure how long John would stay around. It was unfair to John. He would have stayed around. In any event, it made economic sense to stop running voucher schools and go to charter schools. And the reason was we were not a religious voucher school. We were just a voucher school. And by doing so, we could get more funding to run the school. I believed, and still believe, any reform and choice has to be sufficiently rewarding economically to be self-sustaining without seeking charitable support. And I believe that. Now, a lot of people don't agree with me, but that's my struggle and what I do in my schools is to make sure they pay for themselves. And we've been successful at that. So one spring we had to tell the parents, and by the way, there was a tremendous legal assault on everything I've done. At that time in 1999, we were in 3 courts trying to stop the voucher program. We weren't sure if we'd even be allowed to run the following fall. And this was in a chain that got up to the Supreme Court in 2002, but very uncertain times. So we thought it's safer to be a charter school. Went to our parents and told them the story, and said, we're going to shut this down, and in its place we'll open a charter school. Difference is our funding, but they'll operate the same, they'll look the same, you won't care about that structure. At that time, there were about 50 schools in Cleveland under the Cleveland Voucher Program and about 5,000 kids in the program. So our parents who were on that program, when asked to sign up the following year, only half did so. Sign up for a charter school. And naturally, we were curious, why? What a lesson. What we were told, almost without exception, in varying words, was this. Look, I have a voucher. They didn't use the word property right. But when they talked about it, they said, I have a property right. Like owning a house, or owning a car, or having a bank account. I'm empowered. I own this. This is mine. And if I don't like your charter school, all I can do is go back to the public schools. But if I don't like your voucher school, I got 50 other ones I go choose from. I want that power. And they had to pay, I forgot to tell you this, they had to pay 10% the tuition costs. They were paying $250 a year. The state to put up $22.50. They were paying out-of-pocket money for the voucher school, and they didn't have to pay the charter school, and they still kept their property right. That's how these issues are resolved. These individuals that we feel so sorry for understand what you and I take for granted. You understand down to the ends of their toes. Don't think otherwise. Empowering people is how to break them out of this, the cycle of poverty. We run 45 high schools for dropouts, 45. We have over 10,000 students in our schools, and there are only 20,000 students in the entire country in such schools, half are ours. Dropouts. Written off, gone forever. They've written themselves off, their families have by and large, the schools certainly have. We're graduating on average about 20% a year of our enrollment. These are students that would never have a high school diploma. As of this past June, we've graduated over 8,000 young people in Ohio who wouldn't have had a diploma. People ask me, why do they come to your school? Because it's voluntary. They've dropped out. Because we empower them. They come into our school, they're examined, tested, where are you academically? 16-year-old boy, 4th grade reading, his instruction starts in 4th grade reading, and the rest of it. We use computer-aided delivery of the primary curriculum. In the typical classroom, there are 30 to 40 carrels with computers each carrel. In that same classroom, there'll be 3 teachers and 2 aides. In that school itself, there'll be employment counselors, family advocates who are social workers helping with their personal problems, drug and alcoholic advisors. We do the whole 9 yards. This student, when graduating, and boy, graduations are a lot of fun at our place. I cry at every one of them. It's very moving, extremely moving, because the average graduate is a family reunion. This is a student who never succeeded in anything, and finally has. Nobody believes him. Often the student can barely believe it themselves, but they've done it. We say, why? What was so successful here and wasn't successful there? And their answer all fit in the same category. It was sort of like the voucher charter discussion with those parents. They didn't use empowerment as the word, but everything they said meant empowerment. I come into class, they had to wear a uniform, which is just a life skills T-shirt and dark trousers or dark skirts. But none of the other stuff. We don't permit that. They come in on their own volition. They sit down. They choose what they're going to study that day and how long they're going to spend on it. Now they're monitored and they're tested frequently, all the stuff you would do. They have to pass all the examinations the state requires of regular public school students. And they say, in this environment, I'm not distracted by anything or anyone. You come to find out a distraction to such a student is the teacher calling on them when they're not prepared to answer. It's a distraction. Other students are a distraction. What they really mean is when they want attention, they get it. And they say that. In a normal classroom, a teacher is impossible to give it to a student the attention when they want it. They can't. The system doesn't work like that. The student gets attention when the teacher wants to give it to him. It's quite different. When I'm in charge of when I get attention, I'm empowered. And because I'm empowered, I'm going to keep coming here. It's powerful. It's the most powerful thing I've ever seen. To empower those who've had none of it and watch what it does to them.
And just to let you know that the Illinois School Choice Initiative at the Heartland Institute, well, the Illinois School Choice Initiative is a project of the Heartland Institute, and I am proud to let you know that we're taking it just a step, taking it to the next step, and we've started a new organization called the School Choice Illinois. And so I want you all to stay tuned to finding out more information about how we're going to motivate and advance to increasing educational options throughout the state. Thank you again, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you.